Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you very much for inviting me for one more time to the famous by now MARTEC conference in Lisbon. And also many thanks for inviting me to speak on the first day as the keynote speaker. Let me try to share my screen. Just give me 1 second. Okay, and here we are. Right. My good colleague and friend, Professor Carlos Suarez, asked me to, if possible, to say a few things about the state of play in maritime economics and logistics research. And I said, yes, we can try to do this and give a sort of a description, layout of what it is that keeps people off the road, as we say, with maritime research. And then I thought that maybe the title was a little bit ambitious or pretentious, if you like, and decided to talk about the things that we do, leaving what others are doing up to them to discuss and expose. So what will follow is the research that we have done in the past 5 years, and only selectively. If you would like to know more about things that we did with my teams in Europe, in China, and elsewhere, then you can visit my Scopus and Google Scholar profiles, where you find much more than what I will talk about today. And my objective today is to actually offer maritime researchers, particularly young researchers, PhD students, postdocs, tenure-track university staff, to offer some leads, some tips, and some advice, if I may, on possible avenues their research could take in the future for maximum impact, higher impact. The maritime sector is often characterized by descriptive research. And this is unfortunate. The research of the type of, percentages and graphs, tables, and this sort of descriptions. I have stayed away from this. I have done also myself quite a lot of this, but here today I will offer more rigorous type of research, and rigorous meaning that, like everybody else, we economists are builders, are manufacturers. We are building things, and to do this, we need tools. And for us, these tools, profession, trade tools, if you like, they are the economic analysis, mathematical economics, econometrics, operations research. So these are the, what we use to do our job. And this is the research that I will present to you tonight, again, in an attempt to give you tips, advice, leads that may or may not help you or interest you in doing things that you would like to do in the future. So MEL, Maritime Economics and Logistics, consists of apparently 3 things: shipping, ports, and global logistics. The reason I show you this slide is because the first one a work of 2019 now today has more than 33,000 downloads. It's a very widely read work. It's not actually a paper or an article, but it is a little book, and it describes you the overall situation and market in liner shipping, terminals, and logistics. In other words, all concisely, because this is something like 50 pages, no more, there is everything one would like to know about demand, supply, pricing, regulation, and policy in this important sector of the economy, which is liner shipping and container terminals. The same on number 2, which are things that we have done on the global port sector and how this how this is transforming in developing nowadays. And the third one is something that we have done with the OECD in Paris and Olaf Merck, which is only one of the many things that we have done on the Chinese Belt and Road Initiative. An important initiative. I will say a few more things as we move on. And this is something that came out of a workshop that we did in Paris with the objective of identifying trade flows globally and how the Chinese Belt and Road Initiative might influence the way we look at global port networks and their development, or our investments, if you like. So here we are on ports. A very important thing where we have spent our time, considerable time, is port hinterlands. Can we identify them? Does a port today have a hinterland? The answer here is no, because port competition and ports in proximity have led in a situation that everyone has the same hinterland. For instance, in Europe, we have 600 ports around our European continent, and for all of them, the whole of the European continent is their hinterland. So hinterland is becoming a fuzzy concept or a stochastic measure, I should say, and this makes port planning and development a very difficult exercise. So this is an important issue nowadays, particularly when I have to invest hundreds of millions of euro in new port developments or expansion of our ports. We continue with a new research direction. For many, many years, I was very pro-competition when it came to our ports, believing that it is only through port competition that we could achieve efficiency and welfare for our citizens. Over the years, my ideas have changed. As a result of the port reform in Italy and the efforts for port reform in China. And the bottom line of all this is that infrastructure should not compete among itself. Infrastructure should be planned harmoniously in a region or under a regional plan that would help regional economic development and constitute a platform on which now the private sector, like port operators, terminal operators, etc., they could come and they should come and compete. So it is the private sector that competes on infrastructure, but it is not infrastructure, it competes with itself. For instance, we cannot develop independently, let's say, infrastructure in Germany and in Holland or in Belgium, so that infrastructure competes in a way and in an effort that the country tries to attract business and traffic from its nearby neighbor. So that was the second port-related research, which is, I would say, the new philosophy and direction in port planning and port developments. If we want to achieve results, we have to look at our ports on a regional basis, plan them, coordinate their activities and their investments in an integrated way that would help regional economic development, and then allow the private sector, often in public partnership with the public sector, to use the port infrastructure, the land infrastructure, the inland waterways infrastructure, our road infrastructure, and come and compete. Okay, then moving to the shipping industry, a few things that I have selected that might constitute interesting areas to further our research could be number one, which is, our fleets are getting older. We need incentives. If the market is not giving us the incentives, excuse me, we need incentives to renew them and to replace them. China has introduced a system of incentives to renew their aging fleets. And the incentive, of course, is not only meant for the shipping industry, but also for the ship repair and shipbuilding industry, where the country now is pioneering. Could we use incentives? Are incentives necessary for fleet replacement, or is competition sufficient as an incentive for the entrepreneur to replace their ships? The answer is that no, competition alone is not sufficient. Why? Because particularly, I would say in most shipping sectors, but particularly in the bulk shipping sector, the shipper, the cargo owner, is insuring their cargo. In this way, he wouldn't care less if the ship is old, newer, more technologically advanced, or whatever. He wouldn't care less even if the ship would go down the ocean and make company to the fish. Why? Because his cargo is insured, and sometimes is over-insured, so that even if something happens to the ship, he will get his money back even with a little profits. So the effort that these days is being made to make the shipper responsible for the ships that he charters is not going, to my view, be a very successful strategy when it regards involving the shipper in the quality discussion of the ships that we use and we buy. Then number two, also we try to do something different. There we have been always concerned with the amount of competition that we have in liner shipping, with the fact that it's a concentrated industry, particularly nowadays, in the face of, for instance, alliances. And we have come into a situation where 3 alliances are handling the majority of our trades. And we would like to see, if we look at the way expectations are created by the carriers, in other words, the way that they look at the future of the market and plan their investments or their cooperation, if we look at their expectations, can we say, are they adaptive, as we say in econometrics? Are they rational expectations, as we say in economics? What are they? And if I look at the way that expectations are formed, can I say something as to whether the market is competitive or less competitive, or concentrated, or oligopolistic, or otherwise? That is an important, and the answer is yes, actually. The answer is yes. Then the third one, we looked into the cruise industry. And the cruise industry is not only nowadays the most important sector of the tourism industry, because it is growing non-stop. And it is becoming the most attractive, or one of the most attractive ways of people to enjoy their holidays. Of course, we had the interruption of COVID for 2 years, and the industry suffered, but now it's picking up again very dynamically. And the way that this industry for us economists this industry is interesting is because there are two groups that they are handling the cruise shipping markets. In other words, the sector is a duopoly, as we say. And not only now, but over a number of years. So it is interesting to see how this sector is developing, and what are the strategies of these people? What are the strategies of cruise shipping operators who they show year in, year out very exceptional results and considerable profitability? If I look at the way that capacity utilization is presented with those enormous ships that we're building these days, there is no slack, there is no capacity, there is no excess capacity. The ships are sailing full. So there are strategies behind this. Particularly interesting were for us strategies to capture emerging markets, which is something in a marketing perspective, not only of interest in the cruise shipping industry, but any other industry that wants to penetrate, to enter emerging markets in Asia, in Africa, in Latin America. This can be from pharmaceuticals, could be from auto manufacturing, could be any other sector of the economy. What are those strategies? And in the case of the cruise industry, we want to look if companies can target the emerging markets directly themselves, or they should continue using intermediaries like travel agents who could sell in their hinterlands, in a way unknown hinterland because it is an emerging market, how they could sell the cruise products. Can we have direct marketing in those markets, or is the travel agent still an important asset that we could use? And finally, when it comes to logistics or global logistics, we looked into number one here. We look into the Yangtze River in China, a huge waterway, you may know, maybe the biggest waterway in the world, involving hundreds of ports, small or large, and industrial areas like Wuhan, that, for instance, everybody has come to know these days as a result of the origins of the COVID virus. So, and along this waterway, which at its estuary downriver, one will find the world's biggest port, which is Shanghai. there is a considerable part of Chinese exports that are going out and are exporting from the waterway. And the question that we wanted to examine, which is a question that we have examined in Europe, in Antwerp, in Rotterdam, in Hamburg, in other words, in big ports that they are at the estuaries of large rivers. Do we need to use for our exports the hub port that is at the estuary, for instance, Shanghai, or can we directly ship commodities, exports from the ports that they are along the waterway? And in the example that we used, there are countries very close to China, very close to Shanghai, like Korea, like Japan even, and which receive a great part of Chinese exports. And the question was, do I need to transship at Shanghai in order to reach those markets, or can I go there directly from waterways ports, inland ports that I'm developing? And of course, the question is yes, the answer is yes, but you need different types of ships. For you who are technologists, for instance, and naval architects, this is an interesting question to look into. What type of ships do I need to navigate both the river and the open sea, vis-a-vis ships that navigate only the river and then they are transshipping to ocean-going ships at a major hub? Along the same mentality and thinking, we looked at West Africa. West Africa is a fastly developing part of the world. This is where we will be looking at in the near future in terms of being a locomotive that could drive the global economy. And we wanted to see how ports in this huge expanse in West Africa could develop or should develop. Everybody wants to become a hub, but it is not possible that everyone becomes a hub. So in every region, in West Africa, in East Africa, everywhere in the world where you have regional ports, you have to have a hierarchy. You have hubs, sub-hubs, regional ports, local ports, and this needs to be planned. You cannot leave this open to market forces and to free competition, whereby every port manager goes to the government and asks money because they think that they themselves can also become a hub. So this is what I was also talking in the beginning when we were discussing ports, that this needs to be planned and coordinated in a meaningful way. So in this way, in this vein of thinking, we looked at West Africa, having again China in mind. In other words, what would be a network of ports in West Africa that would better serve Chinese and not only exports? Which ones could eventually help becoming hub ports, and what would be those that would remain as regional or local ports? Similar research, but for another organization, we have also done for East Africa. And again, I repeat, before closing this presentation, again, I repeat that, ports are very, very attractive infrastructure for local, municipal, regional, peripheral organizations to put on the political agenda. They are very, very attractive, but quite often all those plans are done on the basis of very fuzzy concepts as to the potential of the port without taking into account what happens regionally or in a wider area, like it is, for instance, the whole of East Africa or the whole of West Africa, which are thousands of kilometers of coastlines. For instance, in the case of East Africa, there are 70 ports. From Dubai to Cape Town, there are 70 ports, and all of them have similar aspirations, and all of them go to donors or international organizations like the World Bank, the European Union, and others. They say, please give me money, I need to develop and become very important because the port is so important. Without having a clear idea what is the competitive environment around their ports, with whom they compete, from whom they take traffic, or to whom they lose traffic. Again, that is our newer philosophy these days, that ports in proximity should plan their infrastructure in a harmonious way and then allow the private sector to compete on that infrastructure. And finally, the last one, which recently appeared in a Computers and Industrial Engineering journal. That's another important effort. This research took us 3 years to develop, and we tried to give solutions with difficult operation research algorithms that we have tried and tested to give answers to the dual transaction problem in container terminals. It's very difficult for those of you that like this type of things. It's a very difficult problem with very difficult answers. What is the idea here? The idea here is that there is a truck that is coming to the terminal to pick up an import container and is coming empty, right? Or there is a truck that brings an export container to the terminal and goes back empty. So in both cases, one of the two legs of the transaction is empty. Is something that in shipping we would call the ballast leg. Now the question is, can I do something about it? Can I optimize this? Can I improve on the empty leg? Is it possible, both in the hinterland and in the port? What are the requirements? And we have so far looked at the requirements regarding port management. What do I have to do at the gate, at the stacking yard, at the quay, and in order to facilitate this dual transaction? Because if the truck has to wait an hour until it picks up a container to go back full, then you have very little advantage from dual transactions. So how can I address this? It's not an easy problem to solve. The next thing, of course, is how to coordinate exporters and importers so that a truck can be used more meaningfully and it doesn't go empty, one of the two legs. I hope I'm exactly within my half hour allocated. This is what I wanted to tell you. Clearly, it's only a few of the things that we have done and we are doing. I hope it gives you some hints, some ideas, some advice for things that you may pick up in the future. I thank you for listening to me, and I wish you best of luck with your future research. Goodbye.